Thank you. So I'm not going to restart. So we had a little bit of a preamble on NGI already. So there's 11 projects in this NGI umbrella at the moment, of which NGI Pointer is one of them. Some are more focused on the startup community and doing business-oriented solutions on top of internet and trying to find more privacy-oriented applications and services using blockchain or ledger technology, working with certain ways of doing data portability, addressing GDPR issues, or working with search and discovery, privacy enhancing technologies, and this concept of trust. NGI Pointer is at one of the extreme scales of the NGI community. It's very much focused towards renovating internet architecture and looking at web components. And it's doing this by looking at the protocols, mechanisms, and tools that enable the functioning of certain applications. We do address some of the core applications of the internet, like web, email, and maybe browser technologies and so on, but not in general sort of applications and not platforms that are very broad. These can be addressed by other projects. So I'll try and get into that a little bit more specifically now that I get already towards the NGI Pointer project idea. By the way, if you have any questions, you can always put them into the chat. We'll pick them up as we move along in the presentation, or we take them at the end, depending on how it fits. On the more administrative side and how to apply for funding and some of the rules, Claire is also on the call now. Claire, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Yep. Wonderful. So that's perfect. And Marina is there to support her from Funding Box as well. And I have Camilla here from Aarhus University as well, who's helping me with the recording and so on. So NGI Pointer is Internet Architecture Renovation is a subtitle to it. And we are 4 members in the consortium. We have Aarhus University, which I'm from, and also Camilla's from. We have Funding Box, Claire and Marina are there from Funding Box. And then we have 2 more organizations called Linknovate and Digital Works. Our roles are distributed in such a way that Funding Box really looks after the open calls and looks after the FSTP projects from a legal, administrative, and sanity perspective. So they're doing a lot of the contract work, they're doing all of the rules and regulations, and making sure that we are doing everything properly. Aarhus University and Digital Works, we're the 2 partners in the consortium that provides the mentoring activities. So we are working with each one of those sub-grant projects in checking that they're fulfilling the milestones, for instance, but we're also trying to help them with additional work. So we're trying to connect them to different people if they need access to somebody at the IETF, or if they need access into a specific community. We're looking at licensing for them, connecting them maybe to the Free Software Foundation or NLnet to help them with that. Or we just generally talk to them about their progress and how they're doing. And Linknovate plays a role that they're very good at finding people and motivate them to apply, maybe also find them to become jury members and help us generally in the progress of the project. So what is NGI Pointer doing? So we've now had our first open call closed in the spring or towards the summer, 1st of June last year. And our first cohort of project has already started now. And we've funded, or we have accepted 24 projects into funding, and I'll get into that a little bit later, what they are and what they're doing. But it means that out of the 5.6 million euros that we have for financial support to third parties, we have spent round about, let's say, 3. So 2.5 are left, thereabouts. It's a bit difficult to say because not necessarily all projects will start because some changes are there, or not all projects will spend all of their funding. So there's a little bit of elasticity right there. But 2.5 is round about the number that we will spend in the second open call, which is also our final open call. So we need to spend all of the money in a meaningful way. Meaningful way means that all of the projects should hit our scope. Now, You probably will realize the more I talk, the vaguer I get about this. So we really do talk about blue sky bottom-up projects, but they are really necessarily looking at internet architecture, web components, tools, and methods. And on the right-hand side, I have a list of potential candidates, which I'll dive into a little bit later again. But this gives you some sort of hints and pointers where we're looking at seeing projects coming in. But as I said, they're blue sky bottom-up projects, so you determine what they are if it's within the scope of what we want. We launched on the 1st of February and it closes 1st of April. So it's just about 2 weeks left until the deadline. But the good thing is, and Claire will go into that, applying doesn't take really a long time. It is supposed to be a day, maybe a day and a half of work for you to apply. And this goes throughout now, of course, also the FST projects and the calls in general. There is an appropriate response. So it should be easy for you to apply. It should be easy to manage the projects. It should be easy to execute the projects. And it should also be relatively easy for us to do this. Our role is really to cut the red tape and make sure that we're spending the money in a meaningful way towards the NGI. And this is also, if you are providing us with a proposal, we will also evaluate it in that same way. It's not evaluated in the same way as you would evaluate a fully blown Horizon 2020 project with an extensive review by several evaluators and a panel and then this and that. We still have similar mechanisms, but it needs to be an appropriate response. So when we're looking at scope and minimum quality criteria, which I'll get to later, we will be very strict on that response. So if it doesn't fit, we'll move the project outside and only move those projects into the evaluation that fit our scope and minimum quality criteria. So there's a few ideas of what to do, but first of all, let's look who we're looking for. Because I think that's probably one of the more important concepts in NGI Pointer is the person that is applying, or the persons that are applying. So this NGI architect, as we call them, is an immensely important person for us. We really would like to know who you are when you apply, what your background is, why you're applying, what your motivation is. So that is something that is immensely important to us. You can be applying as an organization, or you can apply as a natural person, but still there is a person behind it, behind the proposal, or persons. If you're applying as an organization, it's fine that you are a larger organization. You can be a university or a research institute. You can be an SME startup. You can be a small company or a consultancy group. It doesn't matter. We take any organization on board. Natural persons, what's very important is that you are that you are European based. So it's either in the member states or part of the associated member states and the UK. We cannot fund people that are outside of that. And Claire will go into that a little bit more later on. So what are we looking for? The scope is immensely important. It's internet architecture, web components, tools, and methods. And I think the later we get into the presentation, the more examples you will get. And I think that's the best way of explaining it, because we don't have a specific scope that we are delimiting ourselves to. We want to keep this quite open and for you to find your own feet in this. But it's important that it is focusing on that. We do not fund large-scale platforms. We don't fund applications that are sitting on top. We don't necessarily look for a specific business purpose in this. It's more important that we have a workable open source code that contributes to the wider community and that there's uptake of that. So a business as such isn't necessarily what we are looking for. Also, if you are part of a larger project, and you will see that later, we, for instance, funding Scion and Solid, then it's very important to say which specific part you're addressing with your project. So you're not just funding a large project like Scion, you're funding a specific mechanism sitting underneath it that they're trying to solve in the bigger picture. And that's what we really would like to know about. So that's sort of handling the scope. Internet architecture means largely protocols. It's often layer 2 or 3 that we get applications for, but there are also other hardware related topics, communication platform topics, uptake of certain protocols like IPFS or JMAP for email clients, for instance. Tools and methods, there's some testing tools that people are developing within the projects that we're having. And then there are also some methods, like for instance, Linux regression tracking is one of the projects that we have there as well. So it's a very, very broad portfolio, as you will see later. But the scope has to be very precise. It needs to be something that is determinable what you are doing, not just contributing to a larger project or something that's not serving a wider community in terms of open source uptake. This relates to minimum quality criteria. To it, first of all, an open source contribution. So you're contributing to an open source project, and we're looking for something that's hopefully related to the project that you're already doing, but we accept other things. However, it should be clear how you contribute to the open source project, and that this is something that's actively used by a community, not just your own company has a repository that just happens to be open source. So it's not a code dump, it's actually an open source project. Experience contributing to internet architecture community. So this could mean very strictly that you've provided an RFC into the IETF, but that's probably sort of the extreme side of things. You might have contributed to several meetings, you might have attended meetings, you might have joined other active groups that are relating to internet architecture. We're very open to hearing from you, but it's not holding a presentation or writing one email. There needs to be a track record of this experience contributing to these communities. We don't expect that you're all really active in the heavy bodies like IETF or Internet Architecture Board or something like this. There are also other groups that could be very interesting, like the Association of Internet Researchers, for instance, if you want to be a little bit on the softer side or the computer science side. There are some interesting activities there as well. The final experience could be contributing to scientific publications in the internet architecture fields, ideally relating towards the proposal that you're submitting, so on the topic that you're submitting. So maybe the scenario could be that you're a researcher, you have a theoretical foundation for a new mechanism that you think could improve the performance or privacy or energy efficiency of something along those lines. And now you're building a project around making this an open source contribution to the community in a particular context. That could be a scenario that could be interesting. This relates then to the impact. Here we would like you to at least demonstrate 2 out of the 3 impacts. The first of all is really at the core of what we're doing. It's demonstrable internet architecture renovation. And what that means is workable code. We don't want reports. We don't want presentations. We don't want people writing a lot of text. We really want working code. And with the working code, of course, also the annotations and documentation if it's necessary. But that comes secondary. Workable code is the primary objective of NGI pointer. The second point is open source contributions. So all of what you're providing should be under an open source license. There's a variety that are available, and we can of course talk to you about this. Ideally, this is already part of a project that maybe is already an open source project and you're contributing a specific part to it. So there's a degree of maturity to that. So it's not something that's started from scratch and you need to find contributors to this, but maybe there's already a community where there's contributing to open source. That would be an ideal impact. And the final one is standardization and rollout potential. So this could be, again, related to the open source contributions and the community that is there, or it could be more formal that you would like to be introduced to an IETF community or somewhere else where you can contribute with your proposal. And this doesn't need to mean that you go fully through a 1-year process of standardization, which is probably impossible, but that you are starting to have a plan, making an effort towards this. That would be something that we would like to see. So that was quite extensive, but it is very, very important. At this stage, quite a few projects were removed from the first round, and this caused a lot of pain for people. And it was very difficult to explain this afterwards. And, you know, it was also our fault that we were very frank in the evaluation at this stage. But scope and minimum quality criteria are essential towards passing to the next stage, where there will be an evaluation, which Claire will explain a little bit later. So what we're looking for, step 2, open call number 1, we had a number of accepted projects, which we're extremely happy about. So the 24 projects that we accepted for contract signatures, we were very, very happy about. It roughly corresponds to these 8 topics that I list here on the left-hand side. We're making a podcast out of this. So at the moment, you only have Scion on there, but I'm sorry, Digital with Solid on there, but Scion is coming up, and Scuttlebutt are projects that are already recorded but will be released soon. But what we have are a number of sort of topics, and the gravity is really on the transport and network, so layer 1 and layer 2 and 3 protocols where people are working with. So this is multi-hop, TCP, for instance. We have 2 projects running there. We have some interesting projects on core internet applications. So we have Nix, for instance, which is a browser. We have Letters and Lightmeter, which are email clients or email concepts, you could even say, picking up things like JMap. And but you also have other projects, like, for instance, I mentioned a tool early on, which is like a Linux regression tool, tracking tool. And you have bigger concepts. So these are the last 2 bullet points. You have privacy by design, communication protocols. These are Pyrgos, as an example, is one of them. Scuttlebutt is another one of them. What they have is they are, in essence, they look like a larger sort of application that runs on top of the internet, but they specifically address a sub-protocol like IPFS as an example of how to make certain things work. And this is where their interest is. So uptake of certain protocol stacks are also interesting in our project. And then you have this bigger thing of also new ideas and paradigms, and this is where I sort of put Scion, for instance, and Solid as an example, but also some of the other projects. And they're just very big. So if you take the example of Scion, they have now been in existence for more than 11 years, and there's about 60, 65 people working on this project at any one time, or at least publishing in this field. And ISPs are already supporting Scion. So what is it doing here? So NGI pointer funding would be a small drop on the Scion stone, but they specifically describe what they want. So they do verification of code in routers. So it's a very specific topic that they're addressing inside that project. And you can find all of the projects in a handout that you can find in this link. So I just maybe, nope, I can't do that here. Can I do it like this? No, I can't. So I maybe Camilla, you can maybe copy some of the links into the chat so that they're all there. And I will of course also make the presentation available in the chat later on, as well as will be uploaded. But here's is a wider overview of it. So you also some virtualization through one of the projects. We're looking at some identity from through a project. And we have this big set of transport network layer. We have some security related ones and so on. So this gives you an idea of the type of projects that we're funding. And what do you get? So you get up to 200,000 euros in bottom-up blue sky projects. So we really do tailor the program. So these 12 months, we're trying to tailor them to your needs. We don't have boot camps or anything like that where you have to run through or come to certain points and we do checks with you. We really build up an individual mentoring plan over 4 milestones, which are your payments. We do require you to come to a kickoff meeting, and we hope that we can motivate you to come to other events as well and participate, of course, in some communication. But it is a bespoke mentoring program that we're offering you called this individual mentoring plan. some ideas. You can always find the work program. So there's a link in the slides for this one. You can also find it on the Open Call 2 website. And Claire will talk to you about some of the other documentation that is sitting there as well, just in a short while. But you have these 10 topics, of which the last one is just, whatever, big topic chunk that is undefined, that we are suggesting to you. There's one highlighted, and you probably saw that already earlier on, which is energy efficiency. So this is a topic which we think is very important and has been underfunded or under-addressed so far in the NGI context. There have been some calls in other sister or brother projects that have been running on this, but we have unfortunately had no applications so far in this area. What this means in the evaluation, so we don't evaluate per topic, it's all under one chunk that we evaluate. We of course match jury members to topics as much as we can. But we invited a new member to our advisory board that's an expert in energy efficiency. And what it generally means is that we're looking for projects, but we're not favoring them. So if we have a ranking of the projects at the end and the very last two projects, one is energy efficiency and the other one is another topic, that's where we would make the tiebreaker. We wouldn't do it anywhere else. We wouldn't rank them higher because it addresses a certain topic or doesn't address a topic. So don't take this too strongly. It's just an encouragement. And we've made an effort to also address those communities a little bit stronger. So going to places where energy efficiency in general is discussed to motivate them to apply for this call. So that's just a side note. So there's no huge favoritism on energy efficiency, only that last project that could be flipped between a topic that is agnostic and a topic that's energy efficiency. I have a couple of slides on examples of what we're looking for. I mean, I don't think I'm going to go into this. Maybe just on the energy efficiency side to be a little bit more elaborate on that. Again, this is very open. It's just a topic to create a bit more awareness in this dimension. And what we can do here is very broad. So we can either look at mechanisms and protocols that are more energy efficient in general. So we had a question, for instance, this morning about data centers. So we're not interested in making data centers as such more energy efficient from their utility and energy consumption based on, for instance, cooling mechanisms. But what would be interesting is, for instance, the protocols on how they're operating, of course, and how you are working with data, and data centers in general could be interesting. We could also be interested in how you're working with measuring energy consumption in an internet context. So what would be the difference between frequent updates versus having stable software available, or running a video stream versus not running a video stream? How do you measure certain energy consumptions on applications that are running on top of the internet? Could be something that's very interesting and I think under investigated so far. So these are just a few pointers and some ideas. You can find the full work program and the text in the document that is here and on this URL. And with this, I think just a reminder that the deadline is just in over 2 weeks, 1st of April. And with that, I think I would hand over to Claire.
Thank you, Mirko. I will share my screen. Right. I think you see my screen now.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Mirko, for the introduction. I'm Claire from Funding Box, and we're largely responsible for the open call management. And as Mirko mentioned, I'll take you through the application process. First off, you need to apply online. And as you can see on this slide, there is the link to the open call website. And you'll also see an image of the landing page of the open call website. Mirko mentioned that there are a few documents that you need to consider. The one that is most important is the guide for applicants, and it contains all the information regarding the open call, what we are considering when evaluating your application, during the eligibility evaluation, during the minimum quality criteria check, and as well as during the external evaluation if you get to that point. There's also information on the structure of the application, as well as some additional information on the work program and other useful information that will help you through the process. On top of that, we have a second document called the Frequently Asked Questions document. And there we list all the common questions that you've been asking from the first open call, but also currently in this second open call. So it complements the guide for applicants. And we've also shared with you online on the open call website the sub-grant agreement template, which is the legal contract that will be signed between yourselves and the consortium if you're selected for funding. So I really encourage you to take a look at this template to familiarize yourselves with the terms of the agreement. And as I mentioned, all these documents are available, excuse me, are available on the open call website, which I linked to in the previous slide. If you haven't already visited this application form website, you will be able to access it once we share the slides. But I would imagine that most of you have already clicked through. So this is the application process. It's very straightforward, as we mentioned. It shouldn't take you too much time to fill out, and it's completely online. Do remember that we will not be accepting any application via email, even if you have any connectivity issues. Make sure to fill all the required sections online and submit the application form in time, ideally ahead of the deadline, just in case you run into any issues, since some of us may be having connectivity issues at home. So to get started with the application, once you land on the open call website, you'll have to click Start a New Application, which will take you through to the next web page, which includes all the obligatory and non-obligatory sections that you need to fill out. So obviously the ones that are obligatory are marked with a red asterisk and needs to be filled out. So we ask you for some basic information and legal information, and we ask you for an introduction to your project. And then, of course, we ask you to demonstrate your experience in the areas that Mirko elaborated on, which is when we will be reviewing your experience during the minimum quality criteria check. And assuming you pass this stage, the external evaluators will also be evaluating 3 standard sections named Excellence, Impact, and Implementation, which you would have heard of before if you're familiar with Horizon 2020. So in Excellence, you need to demonstrate the innovation behind your project. In Impact, you need to demonstrate the impact of your project on the web. And in Implementation, you need to demonstrate the skills of your team, your capacity to deliver, and the resources you are requesting. As Mirko mentioned, the cap for funding is at 200K for organizations, or 200K for teams of individuals. But remember that each individual is only able to request up to 50K. To carry on with the application form, we also ask you for some statistics, and we also require you to confirm some statements, as well as confirm that you allow us to process your personal data. Another thing I'd like to highlight is that you're able to add a contributor to the application form if you'd need some help from a colleague, as you can see from the image on the top left corner. And you can also continue to edit after you've submitted. So once you fill out all the sections, all of the required sections, you'll see a submit button. You should click that, because that would mean that the application has been submitted in our system, but until the deadline, you can continue to edit. Another thing I'd like to highlight is that we give you the opportunity to upload a supporting document. And a supporting document is just that. It will be used to support your main statements in the application form. So when you're filling out the required sections of the application form, remember that you need to include the key information that you will want the evaluators to see. And use the supporting document only to support the main facts that you outline in the application form. So do not use the supporting document as the main application, even though you may be tempted to because you see that there are some weird limits in the sections. We really want you to focus on being concise and being direct in what you're wanting to do, keeping it to a minimum so that it's simple for you and simple for us when we evaluate your applications. So I hope that's clear. Please make sure to fill in the key information in the application form and not in the supporting document. Here I'd like to talk about the evaluation process. So as we mentioned, you have to submit by the deadline, and then there will be the eligibility check, which is the standard eligibility check defined in the guide for applicants. We'll need to make sure that your application is submitted in English and that you are coming from an eligible country, which Mirko already mentioned. We're looking at member states, associated countries, overseas territories, and the UK. And there are a number of other things that we consider as well. So please refer to the guide for applicants. Secondly, we have the minimum quality criteria check, which is performed by our technical partners in the project. We've already elaborated on that, so I won't go into too much detail, but do pay attention when you're filling out this section so that you increase your chances of being successful. And following that, we have the expert evaluation, which is where your application will be reviewed by 2 independent experts. So 2 experts outside of the NGI Pointer Consortium. They'll be scoring your application and they'll be providing comments. And you'll receive this information after the process. The last step that we have in the evaluation and the selection is the consensus meeting. And here we involve the evaluation committee, which includes all members of the NGI Pointer Consortium. And we discuss the final ranking list to see which ones will make it through. Of course, this is very much dependent on the score that was provided by the external evaluators, as well as the remaining budget, because we cannot fund everyone, unfortunately. The final list that has been selected will be reached out to by the consortium. There will be a couple of processes that will need to be carried out. But essentially, the key item here is that you will need to sign the sub-grant agreement, which is the document I mentioned earlier, which is available on the website. And following the sub-grant agreement, following the signing of this contract, you will be invited to the welcome event, which is the kickoff of the support program. So just to wrap up, as I mentioned, it's very straightforward. We try to make it as simple as possible for you. You should dedicate about a day to a day and a half on average. Of course, you have a couple of weeks left, so you still have time to do that. On top of that, you have a couple of features. Whilst you're filling out the application form, you can export your application as a PDF, or you can delete it if you find that it's no longer relevant, or if you've submitted another application form. Remember that we're only accepting 1 application form per applicant. So you cannot have 2 applications with the same team submitting different proposals. And finally, remember to submit now, because even if you filled out the sections, if you don't click submit now, it would not be submitted in our system. So finally, we have a help desk. If you have any questions, please do reach out to us. The help desk is ngipointer@fundingbox.com. And on top of that, we also have a community with hundreds of members. And here we post news about events and webinars such as these. We also encourage the communities to engage with each other because there's a chat function. You can publish news about your entity or your work. And you can also ask questions. So I encourage you to take a look at that link as well once we send out the presentation. So that's all from me. I think we can begin to start taking questions.
Absolutely. So if you would like to ask a question verbally, you can put up your hand and we'll call you up. Or if there's no rush, I think we can just open up the conversation in any case. Otherwise, you can always put the question in the chat. So one question about the budget in the application form. Can we allocate some budget to the salary? Another question is about the difference or individual and school in the submission. Oh, difference of individual and school. So in essence, we're providing lump sums, but we would like to know how you are spending the money so that we can make a judgment of if this is good value for money or not. So if you can say this proportion of the funding that we're using is for salary, this proportion is for equipment, and this proportion is for other subcontract or other work, that's enough of a split at that stage. We will work a little bit more in detail with you when we're creating the contracts or the individual mentoring plans, but not much more than that. So like I said, this is an appropriate response to the level of funding that we're providing. So we're taking the brunt of the work towards the commission and potential audits, and we're making sure that you are doing this in a much lighter way as a subgrantee. I hope that's clear about the budget. Now about the difference between individual and an organization like a university or school. So if you apply as an individual, you can do this, and you have a maximum of 50,000 per individual applying. So if you're a team of 4 individuals and you're applying each for the maximum jointly in one application, that would also lead you up to 200,000. Whereas you're applying as a university or as an organization in general, you can, as an individual single organization, apply for up to 200,000 euros. However, you need to be sure that you describe very well how this is an appropriate amount of money for the work that you're proposing in this section 3. Is that correct, Claire?
Correct, yes.
I hope that answers your question. Is it Yang? Michele, you have a couple of questions. Would you like to do them verbally or?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, please.
I can ask. The first question, sorry, still again about the budget. I would like to know if one can think of using the grant for funding scholarships, and if these scholarships must be limited to 12 months, or for example, if this fund can also be used to, the grant can be used to fund a PhD, 3-year PhD in Italy, for example.
Yeah. So unfortunately, it's not possible. So the reason for it is that our project will run until December 2022, and we need to write the reports at that point in time to the Commission. So the Commission requires us to have all of the subgrantees wrapped up by then. So we don't want to wrap them up all in December. So we have the first cohort, we have second cohort. So we're thinking that projects, so the second cohort projects have to finish by October 2022. This is for us a fairly hard deadline.
Okay. And instead, it can be used to purchase hardware, for example, or to fund missions, for example, participation to conferences to present the results or
Absolutely.
the technology.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
But
you.
please remember, if you are leaning towards the research side, it still needs to be workable code. It's very applied.
Yes, of course. And the second question was about your slides about the impacts. Probably I missed something. I would like to know, we have to produce some code, so there is a demonstrable impact by means of code. And you said something about the fact that the code must be in the context of a community project. So we have to produce something that is integrated with with a technology or an open source technology that is already available or not?
That can be one path. I mean, what is important to us is that the work that you provide is accessible and usable by a wider community under, open source licenses.
Yes.
Maybe even packaged in certain ways that we can discuss if it makes sense. If not, it's irrelevant. We have some projects that are part of larger consortia or larger concepts like Scion, for instance. That's a good example, but it doesn't need to be. We have also projects that are very standalone, focusing on a specific protocol or a very precise contribution to the next for instance, the some congestion experience, that project is contributing to a very specific conversation at the moment in the transport group at the ITF. So this is some very specific thing that's earmarked for contribution as towards standardization. So we have a variety of different projects enabling you to do what you think is best. What I mean with impact number one is that when we as mentors look through how you've been working, we like to use the phrase, show us. And then you show us workable code. You show us a feature, or you show us a simulation, or you show us a model. That's what we really like to see. We don't need to have a deliverable that we need to read, 20 pages, 100 pages. That's not interesting. We might ask for documentation alongside the code so that other people can pick it up or understand it. But that would be the follow-up question. It always would be show us.
So, for example, if last question, if we propose a new protocol and we want to demonstrate it by means of a simulator, we can provide a simulator, and it is good. It is not necessary to deploy the protocol on a real system and provide a demonstration. Okay, if we can, we do, but simulation is acceptable as well.
Yeah, we have a project where we're actually only building a tool to enable faster simulations. So there's many ways of achieving the goals of our projects, and we accept many ways that make sense towards the community.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
So we have a hand over there. Is it Arsalan Ella Shahid?
That's right, Mirko. I'm Arslan. I work as a research scientist in UCD, University College Dublin. Actually, I have a couple of questions that first I understand from Michelle's chat that we can't pay the PhD students, but can we use the funding to hire developers, for example, software developers?
If your university allows it, absolutely.
Okay.
You can also fund a PhD student, just not for 3 years. You can do 1 year, no problem.
Okay. So the second question is, can we use the fund? So how is the funding flow happening here? Is it just one-time funded, or do you provide the funding in phases, or?
We plan to most likely offer you 4 milestones. That's what we've done with the first cohort. The first milestone is pretty much contracting. So you come to a meeting, we write the individual mentoring plan, you sign the contract, and we give you a virtual hug, and then you get 15% of the funding. That's the first cohort. And then there's 3 more milestones. Usually the first milestone is second milestone is then a large chunk of the development work. The third milestone would be you can branch off a little bit more into how you can create impact with that, or you can just carry on with the development. And the third milestone is more, well, what would you like to do in the longer run with it, or do you just want to develop more? So you can spend all of your funding pretty much just developing, or you can diversify a little bit after the development. What would you want to do with it? So we have some organizations that now are thinking about open source as open core and then business models around it. We have projects that say we have no interest whatsoever doing anything with business. We just want to develop on the open source code. We're happy with that. Okay. But usually we break it up into 4 payments.
That's really good in sense that the funding is quite flexible. The last question is that so in the light of COVID-19, there are some countries which are still under strict lockdown. So is there a way, or is there a possibility for further extension of this project? A couple of months, just like most of the EU projects are now,
We do not plan to extend NGI Pointer as a project. So this means we need to wrap up by December 2022.
Okay.
We think that all of our work can happen digitally. We have experienced some problems in the first cohort with hiring PhD students and finding good quality PhD students and the ability for them to move. I mean, that's at the moment difficult. I have colleagues that sit still in India, Brazil, and Camilla here in the call. I've never met Camilla physically. She lives in she's actually Brazilian, but lives in Copenhagen.
Okay.
But we've never met physically. So we all have colleagues that we only ever experience remotely these days. And that seems to be the norm. So, and NGI Pointer is a project that doesn't require you to be physically present somewhere, at least not at this point in time. And I don't think we require that anyways in the future either.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Mirko.
So thank you. Then we have a question or chat. Luigi, would you like to ask a question?
Yes. Doesn't matter how many times I read your website, but I still don't understand things. I think it's my limit. What I don't understand, has a company, let's say, that has in mind to create a tool, we already created and we are keep developing it, to deliver to consumers, are we allowed to get funded? I don't understand this open source that you explain. Should I create something that should be free for the community? This is not clear to me.
We do want you to, what you develop under the contract, we do want you to open source that. There are various ways of how you can do this. There's various licenses that allow you to be, forever or not so much forever open source. We prefer the forever side, so copyleft is a good model, but we don't mandate it. We just want you to create something that the wider community can use.
So if the community can use part of my code, but I can also use part of my code or a larger part for my own business, this is allowed?
Yes.
Only I have to put available for the community part of the code.
Yes, and it needs to make sense that it is a community contribution that you make. So it can't be just a piece of code that is then irrelevant with the other part of the code that is proprietary. So the contribution that you make has to be able to be functional and contributing to the community as standalone.
And that's the philosophy of Pointer specifically, not all the NGI.
Not necessarily of all of NGI, no. But Pointer is very specific about it because we're addressing an area which is probably harder to work with in a business context.
And the second thing is by reading all the topics, all the area, by reading the expression NGI architect, it seems to me that we are talking about something which is technical. It is architect in a technical sense or in a conceptual sense?
Don't get hung up to the names too much. We just want to sound modern and fancy.
Okay, because we are not creating anything special, but we are combining and using technology for a new concept of internet browsing. And our concept doesn't invent anything, but put together a lot of things that existing to create a new way of fruition and accumulating data from the internet. So this is okay for the.
You need to, I think when we're talking about larger concepts, we don't want, you can always put your idea into a larger context. That's fine. We like that. But when it comes to the contribution that you make, you can only make so much of a contribution with the funding that we provide. I mean, 200,000 does get you a long way, but it doesn't get you to a point where you're going to revolutionize something with a new concept. But the specific idea that you contribute, that can be described very well. And the narrower that is, the more specific that is, the better your chances are to get funded, I think. I'm not a jury member, so the jury still independently will evaluate this, but we will brief them like that. We will say, look for the specific contribution that the project makes. The overall overarching concept is just the flavor, the idea that is there. And that needs to be aligned, of course, with NGI, with this next generation internet, privacy and trust, human in the center. But The idea itself might be something very boring, mundane, and specific, like code verification. Sorry about that, guys at ETH and Cyan, but it's, it's a very specific contribution to the make. The overarching concept of Cyan is very exciting, but we cannot fund Cyan. We can only fund a very specific thing underneath it.
Yes, clear.
Yeah. There was somebody, okay, is that the name, IKCL? Sorry. You couldn't find the raised hand. Would you like to make a comment or ask a question? Maybe we go to Haoju. So I added the email address of another contributor, but he cannot get in any email. Should I submit the application form first, such that he can receive the email? Claire, maybe that.
I would recommend that the page is refreshed, but if not, I would ask you to send an email to the help desk so that I can follow up with the IT team in case there's an issue. But I would attempt to refresh.
Sorry, I have a few kids that just needed some electronics.
I'll just drop the help desk email in the chat.
Yeah. Thanks, Claire. So we had one more request from, yeah, I don't know how to pronounce, or if it's even a name that is listed there. It's IKCL or LKCL?
LKCL.
Hi.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great, cool. Yeah, so we're funded by NLNet through the Privacy Enhanced Trust Program. We're looking to progress things further with LibreSoc, which is a privacy respecting processor. Now,
very difficult to hear you. It's a bit muffled. Yeah. Maybe close to the mic or.
Yeah, I'm using an unfamiliar computer. I must apologize. We are developing a privacy respecting processor.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we need to do as a proof of concept is to pay for tape outs on shuffle programs, shuffle services to actually thing, because we're going for a processor. It's not an FPGA where you can buy a $200 FPGA, no problem. We need to actually prove the silicon, and also some of the other contributors include Staff Verhagen, who's developing Libra cell libraries.
Mm-hmm.
So we're possible to, would it be okay to add a budget for a shuffle, to pay for a shuffle service, shuffle run in 180 nanometer or 130 nanometer?
Absolutely. I think that's that would be no problem. I mean, what we're offering is your lump sum. And when you make the budget breakdown, you just need to convince us that these are the cost items that are required to fulfilling the work that you're planning on doing.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
And in any case, you mentioned NLNet, if I heard you right.
Yeah.
We have a good relationship with the other projects, also those that are run by NLNet. And we have quite a number of graduates from NLNet projects also funded in NGI Pointer. And in general, what is very, very important is that we do not do double funding. So we take graduates very happily, but they need to demonstrate that they've spent their funding already from the other projects. And that's a quick process. It's nothing painful or anything like this. That's just a note on the side.
Cool. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And sorry for using Zoom. It's the platform that's mandated by our university. So there are other platforms that probably would be more suitable in the NGI context, like for instance, Big Blue Button or Jitsi or something like this. Also, I think Jitsi is now tracking as well. Any more questions? No? Then I think we also hit the 1 hour mark. Then I would like to thank everybody for participating, joining. And I think the last thing to say is to wish everybody good luck. Do you have any more comments, Claire?
None from my side.
Oh, we also have Natalie actually on the call. Natalie Mitton, she's one of our advisory board members. So thanks, Natalie, for joining as well. So then, do you have anything else, Camila, or Marina? If you still know Marina, I think she already left. But no. Camila, do you have anything? No. Then thank you very much to everybody for joining. And the session will be uploaded on NGI.eu at some point or another soon. Otherwise, you can already find 2 earlier sessions in February that are available for you to watch again. And if you have questions, you can always get in touch with the Q&A, the email that the help desk and email that Claire provided in the chat. So thank you very much. Oh, Luigi, you have one more question?
Yes,
or?
I tried.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry. Sometimes I see a lot of calls, and unfortunately in my project, it looks that doesn't fit exactly in none of these projects. Is there anybody or any service with you, with NGI in general, that is able to look at the project overview and gives a sort of help to advise you should fit there, does not exist? Because the risk is to apply to so many and doesn't concentrate on.
Yeah. I think you can always get in touch with people and have a chat with them. I think you can. You're always welcome to get in touch with me as well. So that's fine. I mean, I'm not going to give you specific advice of how to improve or get something. I would just give you a straight yes or no. This is within scope or not.
Oh, yes, perfect.
So I can't coach you on making, that would be unfair and helping an individual over the community. So, I think you can also get in touch with NLnet. They're very good at checking it anyways. So their mission is to help people.
Deborah? Sorry.
NLnet, it's called.
Can you write it in the chat?
Yeah.
They can help me to look at, because I have a website, so clearly from the home page, you can clearly understand what's the project.
Yeah.
To see if generally. Okay. Perfect.
Throw your website in the chat.
Sorry?
Throw your website in the chat. I'm curious now.
Ah, okay.
Good.
Mika, I do actually have a follow-up question, if that's okay.
Yep.
So we have currently running NLnet funding projects which are not yet completed. We are also putting in an application under the Assure program, which is being evaluated for a cryptographic primitives project that we will want to put into the router chip that we would also like to try under the NGI program.
Mm-hmm.
So is that okay, as long as we don't double request from NLNet and yourself? So as long as the milestones from NLNet are completely separate from the milestones that we put in for NGI, is that okay?
So I think what you're saying seems okay. So what is very important to us is that the projects then are different. So it's not the same thing that you're doing in the two projects. And that you have the right manpower to do those projects in parallel if they happen in parallel. Those are the things that are important.
Right, it's a continuation because the 50,000 euros from EnelNet will not be enough to cover the objectives.
Yeah, I mean, what will happen in the background is that there will be a conversation between the two projects, so or between me and Michael or Bob, and we will say, you know, is this project wrapped up by September? And then he says yes or no, and based on that, we make a decision if there's a problem or not.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so Chris, I think you're coming a bit late to the party. Maybe the time zone was off. I don't know. I'm not sure you were on the call earlier on. We're just finishing. Oh, Chris jumped off. Oh no, Chris, you're good. Yeah, sorry. Are there any other questions? Luigi, still a question or?
No, it's still there.
Okay, I can.
Sorry.
I have God skills. I can lower it for you. So anybody else? And Pablo Nera, you're also there. You're also part of the advisory board. Thanks for joining as well.
Thank you.
So yeah, then I think good luck and have a wonderful Tuesday afternoon.
You too, and good luck, everyone.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.